Good afternoon or good morning to those of you on the West Coast. I'm Jesse Van Tall, CEO of the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. And on behalf of our staff, our board, and the NCRC members across the nation, welcome to the 2021 Just Economy Conference. This is NCRC's biggest annual event. This is also an especially big year for NCRC because it's our 30th anniversary this year. 30 years of fighting for a just economy. Today, we've grown into an association of more than 600 community-based organizations, 637 to be exact, and a community of individuals who support our independent nonprofit research, publishing, investigations, training, advocacy, and a variety of programs to ensure a just economy for all Americans. You may know us for just one of those things, but I hope you'll appreciate the scope and impact of our programs and interests. We renovate and build affordable homes for low and moderate income families. We provide counseling, business building expertise, and capital to entrepreneurs. We train and support housing counselors. We test, monitor, and challenge discrimination in financial services and in housing. We facilitate dialogue between financial institutions and community networks to increase lending, investments, and philanthropy in neighborhoods that need it. Since 2016, those efforts have produced community benefits agreements with 15 banks worth an astounding $300 billion to the communities we serve, committed by those banks. That includes an $88 billion commitment we just announced last week with PNC Bank, our largest community benefits agreement ever. Of course, we also publish essential research and analysis and advocate for policies to close the racial wealth divide, address inequality, and make a just economy a national priority and a local reality. You'll get a sense of that scope over the next couple of days in this conference and over the next 2 weeks when our conversations continue in the Just Economy sessions. Today, nothing makes me prouder than to announce we have more than 2,000 people registered for this conference from all over the country. It's the biggest turnout ever for this conference, and it's especially meaningful to us to have you with us on our 30th anniversary fighting for a just economy. And we've got a great program scheduled this week, including a lineup of speakers who will begin in a moment, more than 24 lightning talks, short one speaker sessions, and also time scheduled so you can meet each other and share ideas with other conference participants. Then we go deep on many other topics starting Wednesday in the Just Economy sessions. There are people here today who have been with NCRC in the fight for a just economy for as long as we have existed, and there are others who are with us for the first time. For those of you who are with us every year, thank you. Thank you for your continuing commitment and support for our work. If you're new to this conference or new to NCRC, thank you for showing up, for your curiosity and interest in a just economy. I hope what you see and hear will inspire you to do more, to become a member, either as an organization or as an individual, and then get involved and support our work and our programs. Join today at ncrc.org/membership. Of course, I hope we'll be able to meet in person next year and feel good about that. But this year, we're here on our screens, socially distanced, in the middle of a catastrophe, a devastating pandemic that's now into its second year. That's also why I'm fired up even more this year, to propel us into the recovery and make the recovery and reinvention that will take many more years after this. A year from now, if things go well with vaccinations, I hope we'll be able to meet face to face. But even then, we'll still be talking about recovery and how to not only rebuild, but rethink systems that were broken before COVID. That's the course we've got to set now. That's why a conference and a national network of leaders committed to a just economy matters so much. It's also why this conference begins not with a speech, but with a commitment and an invitation to you. because where our nation goes next depends on all of us. So today we're introducing the Just Economy Pledge. The invitation is for you to join me and take the pledge. Sign your name to it, then share it and ask others to join you. Not a bill we're pushing for in Congress or some kind of new rule for banks or housing regulators. It's a simple statement, a vision, a set of principles expressed in simple language to guide and shape and unite us around the nation we want. The Just Economy Pledge is a commitment to ourselves and to our children. It's a call to action to government, business, nonprofit, faith, and foundation leaders, and to individuals everywhere to imagine and create a just economy. It's a way for different organizations, networks, and business leaders focused on so many critical challenges to join hands, to unite and rally our collective will around a common idea. I'm committed, and I hope you'll take the pledge with me. Urge the companies and organizations you do business with to sign the pledge, and then live up to it, embrace it. Tell our leaders at every level, this is what we expect for America. This is what building back better looks like. We need to end all forms of discrimination and inequality in business and community life. We need to unite to advance equitable and inclusive access to credit, capital, jobs, housing, health, education, knowledge, financial security, and personal well-being. Our leaders, our institutions, and ourselves can make a commitment to that. So we are. Please join me and urge your colleagues at work, your CEO, your staff, your teammates, your friends, family, business, and political leaders to sign the Just Economy Pledge. And mean it, then live up to it, pursue it. Ask everyone you know to sign and commit to it. It's online at justpledge.org. Now, as we get into our first session, a few reminders. Please use the chat to interact with your fellow attendees and pose any questions you may have. If you have any technical difficulties, you can reach the support team through the support button on the navigation bar on the left side of your screen. Please share what you hear on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Our hashtag everywhere is hashtag JustEconomy. New this year, we have a conference game. Check out Event Game in the navigation bar to see more details and compete against your fellow attendees for a chance at awesome prizes just by participating in the conference. Finally, I want to thank all of the sponsors of the Just Economy Conference. You can see them listed on the conference website or app. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to our Platinum and Diamond sponsors, which include Morgan Stanley, Truist Financial, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Santander, Wells Fargo, and Ocwen. Now, I mentioned that this is NCRC's 30th anniversary.
Hi, everyone.
It's also John Taylor's, brief visit from Senator Chuck Schumer. It's also John Taylor's 30th anniversary with NCRC, 30 years of fighting for economic justice. And I'm so pleased to bring him up right now. He'll be our closing keynote speaker tomorrow afternoon. But today, he'll take us into our first session. John?
Thanks, Jesse. And thank you, everybody. Yeah, that was Chuck Schumer. And I actually do wish I was a senator. I'm not sure I would be that much different than Chuck in terms of the politics, but it would be a nice venue for us to be able to express our views, because the truth of the matter is we can't be a just democracy without a just economy. And that really is something that's extremely researched and proven in terms of, in particular, people of color and the difficulty they have in being able to build wealth in this country. I am as Jesse said, I'm the president, founder of NCRC. I've been here the full 30 years. And I couldn't have dreamed of a better opportunity in terms of having a life's work. But I'll be speaking more about that tomorrow. But I do want to thank Jesse and all the folks who are watching and participating in the conference, and I really hope you get a lot out of it and take the time to select the whether it's the plenary sessions or any of the workshops that you think would be most valuable to you, you won't be disappointed. Now let's get to the program. As Jesse said, NCRC operates a portfolio of programs that are different, that address different gaps and provide solutions for our just economy. Of course, housing, access to credit and capital, and advocacy fulfill the wealth building objectives of the Community Reinvestment Act are among those programs and solutions. Been our core since the beginning. The future of small businesses and entrepreneurship, which, like homeownership, is one of the ways families accumulate wealth, is becoming an increasing part of what we do. Entrepreneurship, has long been one of the ways to live the American dream. But as I said earlier, like so many things in America, access to knowledge, skills, and capital necessary to launch and grow a small business or to turn a small business into a bigger one isn't equally available to everyone. It just isn't. And as I said, that's been pretty well documented by any data that is available. That's where we're going to begin our conference this year. And I'm happy to introduce the first fireside chat, the first workshop, which is going to be given by Marisa Calderon, who is NCRC's Chief of Community Finance and Mobility, and begin with a conversation about the state of Black and Latino entrepreneurship in America and the strategies for a post-pandemic recovery. Good luck, Marisa, and good luck to the panelists, Jennifer and Bob Dickerson, and all those who are participating in this, and good luck to the folks who are watching in terms of learning as much and being more engaged. Do not forget, sign the pledge for a just economy. It would be very helpful. Thank you. Marisa?
Sponsors and guests for joining us today in our discussion of the state of Black and Latino entrepreneurship in America. With me today, I have Jennifer Garcia, Interim CEO of the Latino Business Action Network. LBAN collaborates with and champions the efforts of the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. Since she joined them in 2018, Jennifer has overseen program cohorts for over 300 Latino and Latina entrepreneurs in the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative's Education Scaling Program. Welcome, Jennifer. And Bob Dickerson as well. In addition to his role as chairman of NCRC, Bob serves as executive director of the Birmingham Business Resource Center and chief executive officer of Foundation Capital, a small business administration certified development company where his efforts on capital access and capacity building have resulted in nearly $900 million in loans to businesses since 1996. And welcome, Bob. Thank you both for joining us today. So let's get right to it. Our conversation today will center on strategies for post-pandemic recovery specific to Black and Latino small business. And to understand how we get there, let's talk first about how Black and Latino small businesses were doing pre-pandemic. Jennifer, since its inception, the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative has produced annual reporting on the state of play for Latino entrepreneurs. Can you give us some context for the Latino small business contribution to the overall economy pre-pandemic?
Great. Yes, absolutely. I just want to say thank you, Marisa. Thank you for your leadership and for bringing this conversation to the table. I certainly think it is timely and important that we're talking about this. So as you did mention, I'm with LBAN, but we collaborate with Stanford University and we champion the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. And that initiative is a twofold. It's research and it's education. But on the research side, we survey over 5,000 Latino business owners on an annual basis. And we're really looking to understand the trends, the factors that are contributing to growth, the factors that are impeding growth. So if I look at pre-pandemic, what Latino business owners were doing, how would I describe that? I would say that they were thriving entrepreneurs, that they were opportunity-driven entrepreneurs. So what does that mean? If I look at the report, again, this is our 6th annual. So if I look at the report from 2019, it's the State of Latino Entrepreneurship Research Report. In that report, it found that Latino-owned businesses reported an average revenue growth of 14% in 2019, which outpaced the US economy. So what that tells me is that the cohort of Latino businesses are successful business leaders. They are resilient. They know how to handle adversity. So when they are put in a conducive business environment, they thrive. They are thriving entrepreneurs. Another statistic here is 85% of new Latino entrepreneurs are what the Kauffman Foundation characterizes as opportunity entrepreneurs. And what that simply means is that they start business out of an opportunity. They see an opportunity rather than a need, which is sometimes the perception. So this translates into 4 out of 5 Latino-owned businesses that are starting because they saw an opportunity. This is all in 2019. So Latinos, again, to summarize, Latinos have persevered. They've been resilient from a personal and a social perspective. And what that has translated into from a business perspective is that they are entrepreneurial in nature, but they are resilient and innovative business leaders, and which makes them, the fastest growing segment of Latino businesses in the United States. I would say too that pre-pandemic, there were 400,000 Latino-owned employer businesses. And I emphasize employer because that means they are businesses that are employing. They have at least one or more employee, generating nearly 500,000 billion in annual revenue and employing 3.4 million people. That's fantastic cohort of business leaders. I will say, Marisa, that an opportunity gap also exists, right? I didn't mention this, but we know that Latino businesses are the fastest growing business segment in the United States, but we also know that only 3% of Latino-owned businesses ever reach $1 million. So there really does create an opportunity gap. And what that means is if Latino-owned firms, employer firms, generated the same amount of revenue and employed the same amount of people as non-Latino-owned businesses, the economic contribution would be 900 billion. The employees would be 4.2 million. Right. So just to give you the differential between that and the opportunity is that by not having these Latino-owned businesses scale to a same or similar level, we are missing out on 400 billion being added to the U.S. economy, and we're missing out on 1 million jobs. So we can see purely from an economic perspective why it's important that Latino-owned businesses, that we focus on it, that we surround them with support and resources, because they're an imperative cohort to the U.S. not only recovery, but growth.
That's great. So, despite a lot of challenges, which we'll talk about in a moment, a lot of good news pre-pandemic for Latino entrepreneurs. Bob, there are over 2 million Black-owned businesses in the U.S. that generate more than 150 billion in revenue. Can you tell us about some of the characteristics of business formation in the industries within which Black entrepreneurs were represented before the pandemic? I think we may have an audio.
All right. Thank you so much.
Great.
You can hear me now. Okay. Well, thanks,
Yes.
Marisa. Thank you for setting that up. You did a fantastic job. So yes, when you really think about it, over the past 20, 25 years, Black and brown entrepreneurs have been playing a vital role in starting new businesses, actually outpacing our numbers in terms of our percentage of the population. And I think that we all know that two things I think we have to focus on. That one of the important factors in closing the racial wealth gap is going to be our starting, growing, and being successful in business. And we can talk a bit about what success looks like. One of those things that we measure, and Jennifer hit on it with the Latino business community, really outpacing the Black business community, are the number of employees. So the more employees a business has, the more we, quote unquote, will lean toward calling that a successful enterprise. The other thing is revenue generation. The more revenue, obviously, that a business generates, then the more successful we think they are. And so when you think about what was happening and what has been happening to Black and brown businesses over the past several decades, and oftentimes history doesn't tell, the real story about the entrepreneurial spirit. I think Jennifer mentioned that these businesses have always put themselves in a posture to be chasing opportunity. My mentor is A.G. Gaston, and one of his most famous sayings was "Find a need and fill it." And so businesses in our communities have been finding needs and filling those for decades and decades. As a matter of fact, for probably more than a century, but we don't talk about that enough. So I've worked with, fortunately, businesses that come in all shapes and sizes, having done uh, SBA financing, having worked for several banks throughout my career. And so the Black and brown business community, and in this case especially, the Black business community represents a lot of different industry segments, everything from healthcare, childcare, facilities management, janitorial. There are more and more companies getting into tech and digital marketing. Of course, we've always had construction and building services, food services, which includes restaurants, caterers, even some of the mobile food services. We all know about the personal services, cosmetology, fitness. So all of these kinds of businesses have been represented well, and all of these are people who are chasing opportunities. That was the fact pre-pandemic, and it is the fact after pandemic. The question is, what are these businesses going to look like coming out of the pandemic, and how do we continue to give them opportunities? How do we continue as technical assistance providers and folks that represent CDFIs? How do we respond to what they're going to look like and what they're going to need coming out of 2020? It's forcing us to sort of reposition ourselves and think more critically about the services that we provide to those small businesses.
That's great. I mean, so really for both segments of entrepreneurs, a lot of growth that is outpacing their white counterparts, for some different reasons and potentially in some different sectors. And this is all really despite a lot of challenges that have been faced historically by these two communities. Can we talk a little bit about some of the challenges that have been faced by Latino and Black entrepreneurs in starting and growing their businesses? And Bob, if we can go to you first.
Sure. Well, obviously, access to capital. I think if you did an interview on the street of any American city and put a microphone in someone's face, they're going to say that Black people can't get money, and they're right. I mean, it's difficult to get access to capital. There are a lot of reasons for that. Financial standing, ownership of assets, wealth in our communities. Obviously, a person who has low wealth is likely to have a lower credit score. So all of those things play into an inability of African American businesses and other brown businesses to access capital. Coupled with that, the fact that we are not as connected to the large, powerful stakeholders as some other people are. So when you add this lack of access to capital with the fact that we don't have those social networks that really help us even access capital or access opportunities, it really has created this kind of systemic disenfranchisement that is persistent in our business community and in our community as a whole. And so we have to continue to fight to make sure that capital markets and lenders do understand that it is very important that our businesses be allowed the opportunity to access capital for business growth and business formation, even though some of the characteristics that we bring to the table may work against us in many instances.
Great. And Jennifer, certainly business formation is being led by Latinos and Black entrepreneurs. How are some of the challenges that Latino entrepreneurs different or similar to the ones that Bob described?
I gotta say, Bob did a fantastic overview there, because access to capital is a critical factor in scaling a business. It's a critical factor in creating and starting a business, and certainly one that has been impacting both Black and Brown businesses. I'm going to approach this from the lens of Latino-owned businesses because, that's where I'm working. That's kind of the lens that I have on. But let me just take this through a storyline, if I may. The funding gap has always existed. We know that. Data has told us that for years. But it has certainly been illuminated as we look at the storyline from 2020 and the pandemic. It really starts by understanding what was the need for relief aid and tracking where that relief aid ended and in what hands and in what businesses it reached. So we can say in 2020, and we can point back to the data on this, 82% reported negative impacts. Again, 82% of Latino-owned businesses reported negative impacts. Only 33% ended up applying for PPP funding in round one. So if we dug into why was there such a low rate of those that applied? And so we analyzed that further, and we found a couple different things. And this will again emphasize these factors that Bob just mentioned. 45% of those that were interested in applying for PPP reported that they lacked the guidance on how to apply. They just didn't know how to get to a lender. They didn't know how to put their materials together, etc. 1 in 5 found that they did not have, or reported that they didn't have, the required application materials. A lot of that is pointing back to the financial records. And then 17% reported that they didn't have a clear or an established banking provider. Now, I do want to share something, and this will tie in the whole picture of why, it'll tie in the picture of what's important for business owners. When we look at those that applied and those that received funding for PPP round one, 18% of scaled Latino business owners received funding. And again, scaled are businesses, the way we define scaled, it is businesses that have received or achieved $1 million in annual revenue or greater. So certainly the unscaled businesses, the statistic is much lower, but for scaled businesses, 18% received funding in comparison to 28% of white-owned businesses. Now, if I look at the network, the LBAN network, the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Network, of our alumni companies, 82% received funding. That is an astronomical difference, right? So let me tell you my interpretation of this is, one, the systematic structures that exist to support small businesses, those organizations and structures that are designed to connect DC to mainstream businesses, did not adequately connect with Latino-owned businesses. That points back to they didn't know, they didn't have the guidance, they didn't have the know-how in terms of how do I connect with this type of relief aid. This data also highlights the importance of being part of a professional resource and network. I pointed to the success that we had within our own alumni, 82%. That absolutely, hands down, goes back to how powerful and important it is for a business owner to be part of a professional network. And just to give you a glimpse of what was happening, and certainly we as the leadership team, we were bringing webinars and information and subject matter experts to our network consistently. This is the latest news. This is some changes that they just made, or they just announced, or the portal's about to open, be ready. This is the material work you're going to need. So that all came from the leadership side. But what was happening amongst the business owners themselves was extremely powerful, because what they were doing is they were saying, I applied here, this is what they told me. I went to this bank, it didn't work, but I went to this provider and they approved my application in 3 days. And so that information sharing and resource sharing became extremely, extremely powerful. And again, why I point back to, if you as a business owner are not part of a professional network, today is the day to certainly identify one and be part of one. And then lastly, what this, this storyline tells me here is the importance of business owners really owning their financials and maintaining accurate and timely records. Oftentimes what I see with businesses is that they are great at running their business or doing their business in their product or their service, but is the overall business oversight that could be challenging for some of our entrepreneurs. And so it's really saying, we really have to ingrain our business owners and leaders to say, you have to own your financials. You have to understand your records on a timely and accurate level. Leverage technology, leverage professional services to do so. But those companies that were able to produce financial records were much more prepared for application time. We saw that in PPP, and we're seeing it now with some of the relief options as well.
A really great example of how addressing that social capital deficit can have a powerful positive effect on the Latino business community and other business communities as well. Now, Bob, I know that that the impacts of COVID and of what felt like a screeching halt for shutdown for small business were felt acutely, not just by the Latino business community, but by the Black business community as well. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the reasons are that the impact was felt disproportionately by Black entrepreneurs?
Yes, and thank you, Jennifer. You mentioned a couple of things, and I just want to highlight one of the training tools and tips that we should all use as we coach and guide and try to advance small businesses is to always be on top of your administrative paperwork. We've been preaching that and teaching that for years and years. And I think that the PPP opportunity, or the lack of opportunity for people who weren't prepared, who weren't fastidious about keeping good records and having records available, was a moment that that maybe a lot of folks woke up. When I looked at the report that the SBA put out, and obviously some of it should have been embarrassing with the number of businesses that were able to immediately get the $10 million loans, and there were pages and pages of 10 and then 9 and so forth and so on. But those were people who not only had their records, obviously it's a lot different in that business or that type business on a small mom and pop. But it's very important that our businesses understand the importance of really having good documentation, because you never know when you're going to need it. And I've always talked to businesses about the fact that if you don't have the documentation, if there is a delay in you actually producing it, then in a lot of ways you are prejudicing the lender to even be more cautious and more concerned about your ability as a business owner, and you're giving them a little bit more concern about the quality of your credit application. So just let me just mention that. So many businesses that had begun to thrive, and I use that word a bit guardedly, a bit cautiously, but have begun to thrive, have begun to hit their stride, now found themselves in a position where, through no fault of their own, they were shut down by COVID-19. We ran a loan program here in Birmingham for the city and our community foundation. And all of us, when we started back in March of 2020, providing zero interest loans for small businesses, most of us felt that, well, this is going to be, 2 months, 3 months, which was the basis of PPP. It was 8 weeks of rent or payroll or assistance with utilities. None of us really expected that the impact of COVID-19 would last now for the last 14, 15 months. And so those businesses that could take PPP and infuse it into their operation, maintain employment, keep paying their bills and survive are still doing that. But so many companies were not able to do that, even with some assistance from the city of Birmingham in our case, or the SBA with PPP. One of the things that we are learning here in Birmingham is that we really don't know. At this moment in time, it is still difficult to tell who the survivors are going to be. It's still really impossible to know what businesses are going to look like coming out of this pandemic whenever we actually come out of it. Which ones are going to be healthy? Which ones are going to be healthy enough with a bit of remediation and repair to stay in business? And which ones have already shuttered? And because these businesses are small, many of them have stopped doing business, and we haven't found out yet. So as we come out of this, we've still got some lessons that we've got to learn, and one of those will be who can we continue to work with in order to help them stay in business. And frankly, we've got to figure out who can we work with to help them get back in business, and what are some of those programs and projects going to look like.
And Bob, actually on that note, there was a recent survey that was done by Small Business Majority that found that 1 in 5 Black or Latino small business owners expect to permanently close by the beginning of the second quarter of this year, and that's where we are right now. Can we talk a little bit more about what you just mentioned, that, if 20% of Black and Latino businesses are going to forever be shuttered, what can we do in the near term, the next 6 months to a year, to address, potentially stemming that tide, and what kind of impact would happen on the economy if that were to happen?
Well, obviously, it's not, for their personal situation is going to be bad, especially those who were depending on that business income to support their families. So we can see without, much imagination, what that's going to look like. But what I've been trying to focus on was not the fact that the 1 in 5 are now closed, and that business is quote unquote permanently closed. I have tended to want to focus our attention on those entrepreneurs who are just that, who inside of them have this innate drive to be entrepreneurs, an innate drive to be self-employed, a real penchant for what they do. And so, those folks may shutter this particular business, but I've seen it start to happen now. Many of them are going to be looking for opportunities down the road. And where, yes, they may not have weathered the 2020, 2021 COVID pandemic, they are going to be looking to launch different businesses, to relaunch perhaps the business that they've had, and they're going to need our help. And so I would really hope that those of us who are in the areas of providing coaching and counseling and technical assistance to businesses, those of us who are running CDFIs and other lending organizations, and our folks in the banking community would understand the need for us to have patient, understanding, innovative, progressive products and services for the folks, those entrepreneurs who want to return.
That's great. And Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
100% aligned with what Bob just said. If I could just add a specific segment to your comments there, Bob, I would add that Latinas. Again, I'm approaching everything from the lens of Latino entrepreneurship because that's my world. But nearly twice as many Latina-led companies experience closure compared to Latino-led businesses. Twice as many. I'm sure there's many factors in there. Personal is probably a huge component, likely due to the traditional roles that Latinas play within their home. But what you were just saying, Bob, do we need to come together collectively, corporately, NGOs, public-private sectors, to really create an environment that is conducive for women to step back into entrepreneurship and small businesses, for them to gain access to resources, business coaching, mentoring, capital, whatever. We should be innovative as NGOs, as corporate citizens, as the public, the public segment or sector, we need to be creative and innovative in terms of how do we support business owners that were really challenged, that had to shut their doors. And I think to your point, Bob, I think the jury's still out if these are going to be permanent closures or temporary closures, but we certainly know that Latinas have been hit hard and that there is opportunity for us to impact them and support them into recovery and into entrepreneurship in their next stint.
That's great. Well, so both of you have acknowledged that Black and Latino entrepreneurs continue to face a lot of the same challenges today that they faced pre-pandemic and likely into the future. So kind of getting underneath what Jennifer just mentioned about those innovative solutions, would love, Bob, if you could share a little bit more about what some of those innovations might be and what we can do to be able to address, in particular, the ongoing issue of access to capital.
Well, one of the things that I would do right off the bat is to sort of throw away the analysis of historical business performance, say in 2020 and 2021, if I were considering a loan to a business that was hurt by COVID. I want to look back at their 2016, 17, 18 performance and make more of my decision based on that, because we know that their balance sheet and their P&L statement or their credit report is not going to look the same. And so I would think that the banks would be sensitive, or any lender would be sensitive. CDFIs obviously have played an important role. They don't have the credit criteria nor the regulatory pressure that some banks have, and we'll admit that. But CDFIs have limited resources. You don't have some CDFIs that are the size and strength of our major financial institutions. So undergirding CDFIs and then understanding that their performance cannot just be measured to the performance of their loan portfolio. I've often used this analogy that CDFI is sort of like a minor league baseball team. The big league team isn't interested in the minor league team winning a pennant. They're interested in them sending players to the majors. And I think that as we look at using CDFIs to help us rebound, understanding that a certain amount of risk, even more risk than has been taken in the past, is going to be important for us to get more people back in the game and back into business. So those are just two things that I think are really, really important. The final thing on that, though, is that I think our banks have to reassess what they feel credit worthiness is and looks like. And this is not just for Black and Latino businesses. This is across the board. There are a lot of folks hurt that were not Black and that were not Latino, and whose financial statements also won't look as well as they did in 2018 and perhaps 2019. So I think just this reassessment, this shift, and maybe a reconsideration of what credit worthiness looks like, considering the fact that we just came through COVID, is something that the entire financial industry might need to look at.
Great comments. Jennifer, did you have anything to add with respect to access to capital in particular?
I do. Again, Bob highlighted and hit on so many key points here. One of the things that I'll add to this is our most recent research report, which was released in January, found that Latino-owned businesses are 60% less likely to be funded by national banks. So again, that is just a monumental statistic that tells me there is so much work to be done. And certainly there are controllable factors that a business owner can work on and elevate. And then there are systematic factors that I think lenders across the country need to internalize and evaluate as well. But when we talk about access to capital, we certainly know that there is work to be done for small businesses, Black and brown alike. But to also speak to where do we go from here, right? What are the actions that we can take from here as we move forward? I believe that it would be a true loss if businesses return to business as usual. We have gone through too much in 2020. We have experienced too much. We have learned too much that if we just go back to business as usual, we would be missing out on a huge opportunity. What I mean by that is we observed many business operate with a heightened sense of awareness, of urgency, of creativity, of innovation. We've seen them pivot and pivot again, to the extent where they might have whiplash at this point. But the pandemic really created ever-changing business environments. And it was that resilience, it was that innovation that allowed businesses to pivot, some to thrive, some to maybe just survive. But I believe it's a great opportunity for businesses to maintain that same sense of urgency and that innovation. And just because you're recovering, just because you've had a great first quarter or first year, don't stop there. Embed that innovation into the ongoing process and operations of your company. Find cheaper ways, find faster ways, find better ways to bring your product or service to the market. What I would say is keep that COVID edge, right? We're all sitting at the edge because of a pandemic. Keep that as you go forward into an economy of recovery. And then from a very practical sense and perspective, I would say understand that the complexity of your company is going to increase as your employees increase. And you have to understand, as a business leader, you have to identify what are the key challenges or opportunities that are facing my company in the here and now, and have laser-like focus on attacking those issues. I know that for a small business, for an entrepreneur, we could be we could fall into this shiny object syndrome, right? This shiny object syndrome is our nemesis. You need to have a strategy and you need to execute on that. And there's so many resources and ideas and tips that could pull us in so many different directions, but you certainly want to make sure that we have a laser-like focus. And the last thing I would say here is, again, pointing back to 2019, pre-pandemic, our research report identified several different strategies that correlated with business growth. And the two that I want to share today is focusing on satisfying existing customers and bidding on corporate and government procurement contracts. This is where it comes, right? We're talking about growth of a business. We're talking about increasing your sales and revenue. You want to make sure that you are looking and focusing on your customer service, on your retention. How are you retaining your customers? How are you understanding how your customers' needs differ today in 2021 than they did, Q4 of 2020? And then I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, but seeking after those corporate and government contracts, preparing yourself from a certification perspective, but also from a presentation perspective, really getting your company to a place where you can seek out and bid on new contracts. I think those are great opportunities as we look to the future of recovery and growth.
That's great. And Bob, I know you've talked a lot about how important it is for a business to actually be able to sell and earn revenue, and the role of certification and procurement. So I'd love for you to expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, sure, Marisa. And I love the having the COVID edge and no business as usual. I think I'm gonna borrow those, Jennifer. Thank you for that. So a sign on the wall of one of my bosses from back in my career said, "Nothing happens until somebody sells something." And it's been sort of a guiding principle of the way I've tried to deal with businesses, because I understand that as a technical assistance provider and as a access to capital person, a banker, a financier, that if those companies don't make a sale and don't sell enough to pay the debt back and make it worthwhile to be in business, then all is for naught. And so we focused a lot of our attention on vendor and supplier development, not necessarily just supplier diversity, but vendor and supplier development, so that we are working with those firms who have real opportunities being provided to them by, in many cases, many public utility companies, major corporations, et cetera. Focusing our attention on those folks that have a real opportunity to sell, a real opportunity in a defined market, I think will be very helpful to them. And as we speed up the recovery of our Black and brown businesses, it's something that we really, all of us should focus more of our attention on. And then use our advocacy on the other hand, of the other end, to make sure that these firms know that there is a value in doing business with diverse companies. They know that there is a value in doing business with Black and brown firms. And that value is about more than just everybody's bottom line, but there's a community value that we can extract when we grow companies from those communities, from the Black and brown communities. The other thing I will just go back to, one of the things that is very important for our businesses to do, and it is to work on their businesses as opposed to in their businesses. As Jennifer was talking, it made me think about that. But as we come out, developing strategies, understanding what works, understanding what didn't, having a vision for the future is also critical. And so between making sure that we understand where we're trying to go in business, and those of us on the technical assistance and counseling end understand that we can focus our attention on businesses that have real opportunities for sales and revenue generation are two important factors.
That's really great. So, you throughout our conversation, both of you have talked and touched on technical assistance and small business resources. Jennifer, I wonder if, starting with you, if you can talk a little bit about the kind of mentoring and training and technical assistance that would be helpful to Latino entrepreneurs. And I'm sure that you'll have a lot to share with respect to the programs that the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative offers.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we recognize that small businesses across the board need the support and resources going into 2021. And here's what's really important that I want to communicate is, for our small businesses, we have to get the mindset that we are now in a growth phase, right? Certainly there's still wounds that we might be recovering from, but the US economy is projected to expand this year. It's projected to have a stellar year, quote unquote here, a stellar year in 2021. If small businesses don't grab onto that until Q4, it's going to be too late, right? So from today, we want to say you want to position your business to think about growth in 2021. Now, there's lots of work to be done in that. I'll extend an invitation right now. We are having a Resources That Matter webinar coming up on May 27th. This particular session is focused directly on capital, to understand what is the capital landscape, what are different capital options, what are different capital providers that you can seek out based on your company, your company's needs, what is the type of product that would be applicable to you. And then the second half of that conversation is going to be what we talked about earlier, is understanding your financial records. Let's make sure that you have your documentation ready, that you are leveraging technology so that when you are going in to speak to a lender, you have everything ready. You have your packet ready to deliver. You know your business, you know the funds that you need, and you know how you're going to deploy that. So again, this is a free resource, free webinar, May 27th. You can visit our website to get more information. We will actually be having about 5 different sessions, free webinars throughout the course of the year, to bring, again, the resources that matter for businesses in the state of recovery and in the state of growth in 2021. The other thing that I would say is, to any business owner that is scaled, and we just define scaled as $1 million in annual revenue or greater. So if you are a Latino business owner, a scaled Latino business owner headquartered in the United States, I would invite you to apply for our Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative Education Scaling Program. This is an 8-week intensive program out of the Stanford Graduate School of Business. It is a fantastic opportunity for really, one, to focus on your mindset about growth, because that program challenges the way that we have historically defined growth, the way that we have traditionally pursued growth, and we equip participants with the business skill sets and tools needed to grow. So again, you could find more information on our website around that program. So two things: May 27th, free resource, and then for scaled Latino business owners, take a look at our scaling program that happens twice a year. The next one will take place in the fall.
Thanks. And Bob, I know that at NCRC, we've also been hard at work on our own set of solutions for small businesses that touch the variety of different communities we serve, including Black and Brown businesses and women and veterans. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what sort of resources are going to be available to folks soon.
Okay, man. Thank you for your work in that area. Yeah, the NCRC has established a small business training and mentorship program that's going to actually, the pilot is going to include 100 small businesses from various industries that are they're going to participate in a 4-week business training and mentorship program. I am really excited about getting this off the ground because these folks are going to have the opportunity to spend time with subject matter experts, folks that can really consult with them about their specific needs. And those are some of the things that we have found to be very valuable. That the one-on-one mentoring and counseling is great. It's always good to have the classes and the workshops and the seminars, but when you can get with someone one-on-one, that can really help you move the needle towards success. So we're excited about doing that. These the training framework has already been developed, and if I go through it, it's pretty much a no-brainer to work with firms on how do you acquire customers and generate revenue. And we know that has to happen. I mentioned that before. But at the same time, you got to be able to control your expenses, manage your inventory. I mentioned the visioning piece that every now and then you have to take a break and look back at what you've done in contrast to what you plan to do and see if you're on track, see if you're off track. And then as you talk about accessing capital, we know that capital comes with a cost. And so let's make sure that we understand the cost and how that cost of capital impacts our bottom line. Those are things that businesses need to know about. No business really operates by itself. And so, and our goal is to have more employers, more businesses that employ people. But we also have to make sure that we're doing a good job in hiring and training and making sure that we convey the culture of our organization to the folks that work for us. And of course, no good program would ever be around without some sort of SWOT analysis. So we know we'll do that. And in general, we'll be looking at businesses in across the board in terms of industries, childcare, organizations, retail, and I guess, retail could be mom and pop, and it may be a little bit bigger than that. Construction and building trades will not be left off. Even farming and agriculture, we're trying to make sure that we in this program, in this pilot program, have something for everybody, every region, every type of business, or maybe not every, but most types of businesses. Our professional and administrative services are not going to be left out. And of course, our personal services, the janitorial services, beauty and barbershops, cosmetology are going to be included as well. So a well-rounded program with mentors to really help identify opportunities for business growth and focus on those key areas to make sure that not only are you selling your product or service, but you're controlling costs, managing employees, and growing a business that has the opportunity to succeed. So I'm happy you gave me an opportunity to talk about that. It's something that we're very proud of at NCRC.
Great. Well, I want to thank you both for your insights and contributions. Really appreciate your participation today and the work that you are doing out in our communities. We're going to go ahead and keep the program moving forward. We have a lot to cover today. Coming up next is Federal Reserve Board Chair Jerome Powell. Make sure you go back to the agenda at 2:15 p.m. Eastern to navigate to the next session and join us for a great conversation between Federal Reserve Board Chair Jerome Powell and NCRC's CEO Jesse Van Tol. Here are just a few reminders. As each session closes, you'll want to go back into the agenda and navigate to the next session. Most sessions are being recorded and will be accessible shortly via the agenda in case you missed something and you want to catch up. And don't forget to get social. We want to make sure that you use the hashtag #JustEconomy on social media. We'll also be curating highlights on Twitter, so be sure to follow us there. Our handle is @NCRC. Now you have a little bit of a break, have a stretch, grab a drink, click over into the Just Cafe. It's the place to hang out and meet people, meet up with someone you know, or introduce yourself to someone new. Enjoy this short break and then meet us back here in about 15 minutes at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Federal Reserve Board Chair Jerome Powell. Thank you all.